talk about character like what a character she is, and we mean one thing. Or we might say, he's a man with real character, and it means something else. And probably we're talking about two different people. But there are people that have both of those qualities. They are characters and they have character. I think of a friend of mine for a long time, Kenny Cram. I first met Kenny Cram years ago. He worked with the man I married. I married Keith, and they worked together in a small machine shop in the St. Louis area. Planet, Tool, and Die. And it was small. 3 men had put it together, put their savings into it and their combined credit. They never employed more than 25 or 30 people. The owners did the managing and they did the sales. They had a few people who did the bookwork, the payroll, and so on, and the rest were machinists. They ranged from people like my then fiance Keith, who was earning money to pay his tuition, up through another friend Harvey, who had children at home and was paying the bills, up to Kenny. Kenny was probably the oldest employee there. He'd already retired as a machinist from McDonnell Douglas, but he loved what he did, and he didn't need the money. He and his wife had no children. They lived in a small, neat little brick house, and he drove an older car that he kept running himself. People said he had the first dime he ever made. But he was an interesting person. He probably drove his car to and from work, to church with his wife on Sunday. He liked to go to the shooting range to do target practice with his guns. He'd go out in the countryside and do varmint hunting. A simple, frugal kind of life. And yes, he was frugal. There were many stories told about this. For example, if he cut himself while doing machine work, well, Band-Aids cost money. He wouldn't get them out of the company first aid kit. He'd take some paper towel and tape and wrap up his finger. False economy, maybe, but that was Kenny. And his car. My favorite story is about his car. Peeling paint, worn out upholstery. Who knows how many miles it had on it. He could keep it running. He didn't care about the cosmetic things. Once, one of his coworkers wanted to ride home. And Kenny was a good-hearted guy, so he gave him a ride. The guy got in and sat down, and there's water on the floorboard. Say, Kenny, what's this? Have you been driving in the river? Oh, no. They just don't make door gaskets like they used to. Have you seen what they charge for those at the auto parts store? He wasn't going to replace it, even though it rains every 2 or 3 days in St. Louis. That was Kenny for you. Well, the guy's eyes must have been rolling, and tongues were wagging soon, because he told everyone else, and they kidded Kenny about having water in his car. I suppose it got to him eventually. One day in the break room, he announced, well, no more water in the car. His coworkers did what he thought. He knew what they were going to do, and they did. They went out to the parking lot, yanked open the door. Same old rotten door gaskets. That doesn't solve anything. There's no water on the floor. What's he done here? He drilled holes in the floor to let the water out. A no-cash solution, but that was Kenny for you. Well, in time, they gave up on that joke, and life moved on. Other things took their attention. And finally, one week came, the things really got the attention of the owners. It was a small business, cash flow was up and down. They must have really been sweating it. The bank account was empty. Payday was coming. There were checks they thought would come in, hadn't came in. They put all their savings into it, all their credit. What were they going to do? If they didn't make payroll, people like Herbie were going to quit. He couldn't go on not getting paid. The company might teeter over the brink into insolvency. It was a real crisis. There was only one man they could think of that might be able to help them. And they tried this. They talked to Kenny. Kenny went home and brought some cash from his savings and loaned it to the company to make the payroll. And life went on. That's the kind of person Kenny was. I was privileged to know him till the end of his life. He had character, and he was a character. To me, his story exemplifies in a different way that saying that a penny saved was a penny earned. His savings were people's earnings that week. My friend, Kenny Cram.